Good evening. I would like to welcome you to the community conversation today. My name is Cheryl Robertson. I am a counselor and I am sitting in for Jeff Wingard, who is our Community Development Committee Chair. Tonight we are looking at public safety, which is the fire, emergency medical services, and hazmat. Public safety services are focused on keeping the community safe. Fire department is going to share some of the things that they do about the town's fire and special incident response, emergency medical services, hazardous material response team, emergency management planning and response, life safety program, and public health response services. We have with us tonight Deputy Chief Kevin Searway and Chief Jeff Lowe, who is our Public Safety Director, and also Dan Demerit, who is a town councilor. So thank you and welcome to our community conversation. And I will give it to
Thank you.
Chief Lowe.
Just as soon as I get a slide or two up here, we'll kick off. I want to thank the people that are in the audience out there on Zoom with us tonight. A little sparse in the chambers, but that's okay. We can certainly we can get some information out, and hopefully those that are out in Zoom land can share it with others in the community and whatnot, and encourage them if they have questions or concerns to get a hold of me or Deputy Chief Searway. I'll be more than happy to answer whatever we can as far as questions. And if we don't know, then we can certainly find that for you. So as the slide shows you up there, we're here for a community discussion. Can I have the next one, Bill? So as important as a community discussion is for people in the community, it's also really important for us. And what we're hoping to get out of this discussion is feedback from really anybody that is in the community, whether they're here tonight or not. And I had mentioned that just a minute ago about getting the word out and encouraging people to ask us questions about what we do and how we do it and why we do it. The only way that you can be informed and can understand is to ask those questions. And we're certainly not shy about giving answers. We give you answers the best that we can. We want to understand the community priorities. We want to know what the community wants. As we do our strategic planning and as we formulate our budget and we look at training initiatives and those types of things, all of that really should be around community wants and expectations. And those are the two bullets that are up there in the center. It's hard for us to do that stuff working in a silo. Now, there are things that we have to do without question, but certainly having that feedback from the public to make sure that we are aligning ourselves to be able to meet those demands or those goals is important for us. And the last one is, if you have concerns or anybody from the public has concerns, we want to hear those. We can't make the system better. We can't identify things that we don't recognize, or we can't address things rather that we don't recognize if we don't get some feedback from the community. So it's really important for us that if there are concerns about whether it's the way we deliver service or individual crew members or whatever the case may be, we need that. We need that to make ourselves better. And again, like I said, to make sure that we're meeting the community expectations. We really want to meet those. And we really want, or we really are trying, but again, in a silo, it's hard to accomplish that. So feedback is super important for us whenever we can get it from you. Okay, Bill. So we have, like the counselor mentioned, we have a host of services that we are responsible for. And basically what you see up there are 5 bullets around what defines fire services here in the town of Orono. Now, this isn't typical of every community. There are communities that only provide fire suppression. There are communities that provide fire suppression and emergency medical services, but you really have a holistic approach to public safety here in the town of Orono and what we're doing. And I think that we're fairly decent at delivering it, considering our staffing model and what we have for resources. I'll kind of run down through the 5 for us real quick. The first one is fire suppression, and that has anything to do with us firefighting. So that could be building fires, it might be grass fires, it might be vehicle fires, It might be releases of hazardous materials, false alarms, carbon monoxide complaints, anything along those lines are we would consider to be fire suppression activities. The next is emergency medical services, and that is when the ambulances are deployed for request for service. So anytime the ambulance goes out the door, when we do a blood pressure check, when somebody says, hey, can you come give me a hand getting off the floor, those types of things, those are emergency medical services responses that we make. Next one is special operations. And I alluded to hazmat a little bit under fire suppression. Hazmat under special operations are the larger hazardous materials releases. So if the university, we have a release of hydrogen, or there is a problem in Bangor where there's a chemical spilled and they're not sure what it is, those types of events. Our team is the team that goes out, gets in those special suits and tests chemicals and plugs leaks and those types of things, and generally stops a leak and tries to make the environment as safe as they can before the specialized cleaning crews come in. So that's what we do for hazmat. But there are other special operations that we do. We perform water rescue. We do surface water rescue. So if somebody's in trouble on Pushaw Lake or there's a problem in the river, we will do surface water rescue. We also do ice water rescue. So when those bodies of water freeze over, we are trained to go out onto the ice, again in special suits, and retrieve somebody who is above the ice or perhaps in the middle of the water, but still reachable. Anything subsurface is another specialty altogether that we're not trained for. And frankly, we wouldn't have the capacity to do with the way we're staffed and funded right now. That's more of a game warden response for anything below the surface. But anything above the surface, whether it's a person or an animal, we'll certainly go out and make our best efforts to effect a rescue. The next item that you see there is emergency management. And that is really planning and preparing for incidents or events that may occur in Orono. An incident would be a severe thunderstorm comes through and topples trees and creates a lot of damage. An event is something pre-planned, like main day or those types of things. Those are all emergency management things that require specialized planning and preparation and those types of things. The other things that are involved in emergency management are standing up to be able to handle winter storms, bringing all the departments together to manage storms as far as trees down, fire department response, road closures, all those things. Another piece of emergency management that we're starting to get into and look at more seriously are things like sheltering, warming centers, cooling centers, those types of things. We understand that there's a desire in the community for them. There is a specialty to it, and there is some financial commitment to it. But we are looking at developing those programs now. And again, it's not simply opening a space and saying, hey, come on in, charge your cell phone and be warm or be cool. There's a process that has to be in place. There are liability issues that we have to look at and all those things. So just like anything else, good intentions are always muddied up by legalities, and that's kind of what we're going through to make sure that we're able to provide those services for the community. And then the last bullet you see up there is community risk reduction. And when I say that, this is a reasonably new effort in dealing with risk that's in the community in the state, not just in Orono. And really, I'll use the word holistic again. It's really a holistic look at everything that poses a potential risk here in Orono that we can intervene on. Now, very often in the fire department, we've talked about risk reduction in the past. We've talked about fire prevention activities or fire extinguisher training or smoke alarms, those types of things. And those are still certainly parts of community risk reduction that we'll continue to do. But what we're looking at is we're looking at getting out and we're looking at doing home assessments for seniors. You know, what are your risks for trips, slips, and falls? Which is the number one emergency response we make here in Orono is for seniors that incur those types of injuries. So risk reduction really is looking at how do we prevent them from happening? You know, is it a matter of double-sided tape on a throw rug? Is it a matter of getting rid of a throw rug altogether? Is it a referral to maybe some home health services or occupational therapy services to deal with some of the issues. Looking at playground safety when there's a concern that's raised there, doing inspections, those types of things. Anything that poses a risk to the community that we could take a proactive approach in managing really falls in the community risk reduction realm. Again, just starting the program now. It's a change in the way we do things, so it takes some time to integrate and to get up and moving. But outside experience has shown there's a tremendous benefit to it in reduction of calls for service. But also, if you can prevent a fall and a broken hip on a senior resident, that's a tremendous financial burden that's alleviated off that resident, off the Medicare system, and other things. And frankly, that's just a better quality of life for that person. So if we can mitigate and reduce some of those things, those are the things that we want to do. So it's a lot, but really it's a nutshell, and it really reflects what your fire service here in Orono, your fire department in Orono is doing. Okay. The way we manage all that stuff is by dividing out labor within the fire department. We have specific divisions, and a lot of these divisions cross over, and we have somebody that is responsible for each of these divisions, in addition to all the other duties that they have to do. So, for example, training. Training is a huge component of what we do because of all the specialty resources, or all the specialty services rather, that we provide in the fire department. In addition to making sure that our people are trained, we meet the bare minimum training requirements every year for fire suppression and EMS. So we have a captain that's responsible for doing training, but in addition to that training, that person also has to run their shift. They also have to make sure the needs of their people are managed. They also have to answer calls and all the other duties that go along with that. So when I say that there are people responsible for these divisions, it's not their sole responsibility. It is a shared responsibility, and it's really labor intensive. And I think it speaks to the people that you have working in the fire department that they're willing to take on all these extra duties. And frankly, in some cases, like training, all the extra risk, because they believe in what they do, they believe in the organization, they want to provide a really good product for the town of Orono. So the divisions we have are administration. Administration is basically what Kevin and I do. We provide overall management for the organization. We ensure that training is maintained. We review policy, we write policy, we approve budget purchases, we manage the budget. Anything geeky that you might find that's administratively important to the fire department, that's kind of what we do. I'll say sometimes we'd rather be on the trucks, but if we didn't like doing it, we wouldn't be doing it. So suppression is all that firefighting stuff that I talked about, the firefighting and all those things. Somebody has to be responsible for maintaining the equipment, for purchasing equipment, for making sure that hoses are properly managed, as far as testing and maintained and that type of stuff. All that falls under suppression. Emergency medical services is the ambulance service, but it's not just delivering patient care on the ambulance service. It's making sure that training is maintained in a supportive manner to the fire captain that's in charge of training. It's making sure that quality assurance is done. So every run that we respond to, somebody evaluates that run to make sure that it made protocol and that treatments that were delivered were appropriate and times logged were appropriate. And when we find some type of variance, we make sure that we follow up on that. And if additional training is required or some type of performance counseling is required, we make sure that all of that stuff is done. We already talked about community risk reduction, special operations. There's somebody that's responsible for each section of special operations. So there's somebody that's responsible for the hazardous materials team. There's somebody that's responsible for our water rescue training. There's somebody that's responsible for our ropes and our confined space rescue training. So each aspect under special operations, there's one person that provides oversight. That's pretty much Kevin. And then each element of that special operations group has somebody responsible for that piece. And then emergency management. And emergency management basically defaults back to me, but I have people in place that are helping with planning and IT resources and all that type of stuff. And emergency management, I'm going to be honest, has migrated or has expanded rather. It's not just the fire department that's involved in it as much anymore. A community development is involved with it, both Pat and Mitch Stone downstairs. We have Belle and Nancy that are involved with it. Sophie is an excellent liaison. When we stand up the emergency management center, Sophie is kind of an outsider. She's a liaison. She does have some responsibility, but by design, it's mainly operational folks that manage that. And then Sophie is a liaison to the council so that information is able to be provided to them. If we have to have policy decisions made on the spot, she's able to do that and those types of things. So those are the divisions within the fire department. Go ahead, Bill. So just some general information about us. Our staffing consists of 4 shifts. We've just recently gone to 6 firefighters a shift providing coverage, and that's 24/7, 365 days of the year. Every day there are firefighters in the Orono Fire Station. They do not respond from home unless there is a recall. And that's how the station is staffed next door. We're staffed at 6, but we will go down to 5 people. And the reason we went to 6 is to try to reduce some of the overtime burden. So when people are on vacation or they're out sick or whatever, we have that little bit of overstaff to try to reduce some of that impact on the budget. Firefighters work an average of 42 hours a week. The shifts are 24 hours long. Followed by 3 days off, unless there are members that are attending training or working overtime shifts like it says there. I will tell you that with the demands placed on the members of the fire department, with all the divisions that we just talked about, very rarely do they ever get a full 72 hours off. Most of them are involved with fleet maintenance, or they are training, or they're coming back from training, or they're attending meetings or working overtime. So yes, they do have a scheduled 3-day block off, but again, very rarely do they ever see a full 3 days off. There's usually something going on that they're back for and they're engaged in doing. We have a lot of firefighters right now that are going through EMS related classes. So they are committed quite a bit. That's the newer younger people that have come into the fire department that need to work their way up through paramedic, and they'll see some additional training as well. All the firefighters over there are required to be paramedics, including me. There are only 2 people who are not firefighters right now, and they were grandfathered from the time they were hired. Or I'm sorry, EMS was implemented after they were hired, and they were not required to be firefighters. But they still contribute. I'm sorry, paramedics. My mistake. They're required to be paramedics, but they still contribute. One of them is an advanced EMT and still able to perform on the ambulance and provide patient care. And the other firefighter who is not licensed as a provider will still operate on the ambulance as he needs to and can function and can assist the licensed people. And he is not in any way right now a detriment to the organization, the way that we are staffed and the number of people we have and whatnot. So they are engaged and involved in doing things to the best of their capacity without any complaint at all. All firefighters have to be certified as hazardous materials technicians. And then, like we said, as you can see in the last bullet, all of our firefighters are union firefighters, and they are part of the International Association of Firefighters. Okay, Bill. Just some general information about our service areas. Our primary service areas, Orono and VZ. And we include VZ as primary because we have a service contract to provide ambulance services to them. Our secondary areas that you see there, and these are secondary areas that we would respond to primarily on a mutual aid request. So more than likely, very often we'll go to these areas for ambulance coverage, but we do respond to these areas for fire coverage at all. In Milford, we don't do very much fire mutual aid with them. Most of it is EMS response. However, as services are experiencing staffing issues, I would expect that our secondary area will grow eventually, and Milford will become more reliant on us for mutual aid. And I don't say that in a bad way, because we are reliant on all those secondary communities as well for providing us mutually. And then tertiary, when I talk about tertiary, mainly what I'm talking about is our hazardous materials response requirements. In addition to serving the town of Orono, we are also a state asset for hazardous materials response in that we are capable of managing weapons of mass destruction. And weapons of mass destruction would be a chemical or a biological agent that's released. Might be a chlorine car that's been punctured. It might be a release of a biologic agent, whether it's anthrax or ricin or whatever else that might be out there. And our tertiary areas really are all of Penobscot County, which we are contracted. We're contracted to provide hazardous materials response to all of Penobscot County. That's an agreement we have with the county and the county fire chiefs. Our state requirements require us to be able to go statewide anywhere. We do have an international compact, so it's not unreasonable to think that we might be called to Atlantic Canada. That would be probably New Brunswick if they needed additional hazmat resources in the St. John area or something like that over there. And then we would be considered a national asset under FEMA under Region 1, which is the Northeast, where we could potentially be deployed to support other municipalities, counties, or whatever the case may be with hazmat responses. Not very likely that we will make a tertiary response anywhere. I certainly don't expect to see it in my career, but it is a possibility, so it's worth being mentioned. So go ahead, Bill. Service demand, you can see up on the calendar, calendar year service demand, just to give you a general idea of where we are. We're looking at, we tend to run right around 1,500 to 2,000 calls for service. Just to give you some insight, this year to date, actually, Belle, you can go to the next slide, please. You can see on the slide there, to date, we're at 1,551 calls. Out of those calls, 1,149 of them are EMS related. And then you can see a trend over the last few years. For whatever reason, 2020 decided it didn't want to show up on the slide. So we'll just pretend that year didn't happen. And you've got those 4 years that are laid out there. We do not expect to see a decrease in our EMS responses. EMS more than fire, and fire's in desperate times right now, but EMS more than fire right now is at a critical tipping point with staffing and resources statewide. And we are seeing our resources in Orono being called further and further away to support other agencies. And we charge for those services. We charge a nominal fee when we go out. Normally it's advanced life support backup for ambulance services that don't have paramedics, but they have critical patients that need some type of intervention. So we do provide a nominal fee for that. And we're just seeing a demand for that increasing. And part of that is we don't have a lot of providers in the state. There aren't a lot of paramedics, and we're starting to dwindle on emergency medical technicians, which is the lowest license you can be to staff an ambulance. That's what's driving a lot of our demand for service right now. So you can see, we've had a general increase in percentage of service-related EMS calls. We're at 75% so far this year. It wouldn't expect me over the next couple of years to see us jump to 80 or even 90% just because of the demand. And the demand isn't just outside responses. We're seeing an increase in Orono as well for service demand. So it's a statewide issue. It's not solely to us, and it's an issue that's going to require legislative action to correct. In the meantime, we're doing the best we can to manage it. So.
The 1,551 calls, Jeff, is that to date this calendar? It doesn't.
It's this fiscal year. Yes,
Fiscal year,
all those numbers are based off the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill. Just to give you a general description of what our fleet looks like, we are not over equipped by any fire department standard. Our fleet right now is one pumper truck. That's the truck that carries the water and all the hose. And we have one reserve truck so that if that primary truck goes down, we're able to still respond to fire calls. We have 2 ambulances, and one is supposed to be the primary response ambulance, and the second one is supposed to be a reserve. What we're finding is both of those ambulances right now are pretty much primary response ambulances because of the volume of service that we're seeing, the volume of requests for service rather. We have one tower truck. That is the truck that has the ladder on top of it. And I call it a dumpster on the stick, the bucket on the end of the ladder there. That is our primary and that is our only aerial device in the community. A lot of people will ask or will blame that truck on the university, but the truth is whether the university was there or not, we would still need a ladder in the community. We need it to reach heights. It's not just height that we need to reach. It's also reach in general. So the actual height that truck may be up may only be 20 feet, but we might need that all 100 feet of reach to be able to get to what we're reaching to. And that might be a roof so that we can safely work on it in the wintertime for a chimney fire. That might be reaching out over the bridge to reach somebody in the water. We might need it as an anchor point to connect ropes to go into confined spaces. So it's not just a ladder that we put up to spray water. It's a working platform for multiple uses. And frankly, that type of platform, the tower truck presents the safest platform for us to operate off of when we're doing those specialty operations, which we are really required to do by our mission and our commitments in the community. We have one hazardous materials response vehicle that carries all the hazardous materials gear, except for some of the cleaning stuff that we use, and that's carried in the trailer that you see listed up there. We have one boat, and that boat works in conjunction with the towns of Orono and city of Old Town. So if we have something on the lake or on the river, it's not just our boat out there operating. Normally we'll have another boat out there with us as redundancy and to just make the operation easier. We have 2 support vehicles. Those are the pickup trucks that you see over there. One is used primarily for details and for supporting our fire suppression operations. So we may carry hose in it, we carry equipment in it. If we have to go pick up supplies or parts for the fire apparatus or whatever for our in-house mechanics, we will use that. It's used by the life safety coordinator. He's the person that goes out and does inspections and does the community risk reduction stuff. The other one is the truck that we will tow the boat with. It is a command platform. So if we have a major fire, it can respond. It carries additional firefighting equipment in it. It's the deputy chief's vehicle. So if he has to attend meetings or he's going to take in command of a scene or whatever the case may be, he has that vehicle available to him. And the last one is the administrative vehicle. That's my vehicle. Not only do I use it for command functions, but I use it for meetings that I have to attend. I do support the ambulance when it goes out. I'll run ambulance calls and I'll respond to.
I was just looking for my fishing license.
If there are other calls that I need to respond to or investigations or whatnot, that's the vehicle that I take to go to those types of calls. Go ahead, Al. So just some general discussion about the budget, and this is very high level stuff. What we were budgeted in FY22, you can see there. In FY23, we had an increase of $309,000. That increase was primarily related to adding staffing to the fire department to get to that. I'm sorry, it was overtime. Yeah, my mistake. Thank you very much. I got the grant mixed up with the overtime. Yeah, we were very high in overtime. We're still high in overtime. That increase revolved around overtime. We had people out on long-term injuries. That was pretty much the primary driver, that and some educational stuff to get people to paramedic and those types of things. Some of the biggest drivers that you see there, salaries and overtime are still driving the budget. We were just able to get our 3 overstaffed people in and online. They will be they'll be starting their shifts. Are they starting the shifts now? They're on shift this week. So we hope to see some reduction in the overtime numbers, but we're still still going to see a salary and overtime up there, hopefully just not as bad. Most of that's unscheduled overtime. So again, that goes back to that illness, people out. Also, training wages, sending people to paramedic school is costly. When we have to backfill those shifts, that's another driver for those overtime wages. Fleet maintenance is always going to be a driver of expense for us. We have newer apparatus. We just received a new pumper truck. We have ambulances that are coming to what I would call the end of their serviceable life as far as maintenance fees and cost and time out of service go. We have some money budgeted for one of them coming up, as in our budget request. But fleet maintenance, especially with cost for contractors to provide that repair services, is expensive. And that's always going to be a driver for us. The tower truck, over the next few years, I expect we'll see some increased cost. That's not because it's being overused or it's being misused or anything like that. That's just the life cycle of large trucks, special aerial apparatus, because of the complexity of the units, the salt and road maintenance, those types of things that affect electrical systems and vehicle components and that type of stuff. And the last one, and something that people don't really think about as driving budget, but really impacts us, is contract services. When I talk about contract services, what I mean is all the testing that we have to have done internally for the specialized equipment that we use. And that includes pump testing, that's ladder testing. We have a contract for medical oxygen for a vendor to come in and deliver us that. It's the heart monitors that we use on the ambulances to evaluate people and get EKGs with. It is the medical director fees, the stretchers that we use, those types of things. It's very costly to have annual maintenance, to have service contracts that we can get service right away if they fail, and to have a third party come in and independently evaluate our equipment to make sure it's serviceable. And that's what is covered under those contract services. When we look at pump testing, ladder testing, oxygen, and medical director alone, that's about $10,000 or a little bit more in cost, not including all the other maintenance contracts. So again, a pretty big budget driver for things that we have to make sure that we're compliant with Department of Labor regulations, and we're providing best service that we can for our patients. We're not likely to have an equipment error when it's a critical time for us. So go ahead, Bill. Some of the accomplishments that we have had over the last fiscal year, and really over the last couple of years, we've been working on some of these things. We were able to put together a 3 community training center. That's out by the transfer station or by the dump. And that's a joint effort between Orono, Glenburn, and VZ, where we have built a training center so that we're able to take new firefighters out, and we're able to continue developing and building our skills and refresh our skills on core firefighter things, such as searching in low visibility and setting ground ladders and doing confined space rescue and that type of stuff. We have developed an internal instructor cadre for EMS related programs. Rather than bringing somebody in from outside and costing a few $1,000s, we have developed our own internal abilities, and we're able to pay staff members some overtime to come in and provide training for our people, and we have seen a reduced cost in that. Redefining and retooling the life safety and fire prevention program, like I talked about, that is related to community risk reduction. We are working towards continued compliance with the fraternities. We are working towards streamlining our inspection program of the housing stock we have here in Orono, the 3-unit and more residential facilities. We have worked really hard at redesigning and rebuilding the training system that we have for our new firefighters and our fire officers. basically going through a process where we are validating them against national standards to make sure that they're compliant. In addition to the outside training that we provide for them for certification in those areas. And the last one is we've received several grants geared towards firefighter health and safety and wellness. Those include the grant for the fitness equipment that we received, the grant for the washer and dryer for decontaminating fire equipment that we know carries carcinogens after building fires and those types of things. The grant we received for bailout equipment. So if a firefighter is separated from their group or they become trapped inside a building fire, they're able to go out a window on a rope. All grants that we were able to bring into the fire department to help us perform our mission in a safer manner. Go ahead, Bill. And that's some of the ongoing projects that we are looking at, which is continuing to become more self-aware around both personal and organizational areas as they relate to DEI. That is, awareness in how we act in the community, things we say, subscribing to and believing in our policies that we have in-house. We're looking at examining how community risk reduction is performed, looking for opportunities to optimize efforts like it says there. Again, it's a new program to everybody, including us, and we really would like to take a lead and really start pushing some good stuff out in the area that other people can mirror and hopefully take on for themselves. We're always looking at encouraging people to professionally develop. It reduces risk, it helps eliminate liability, and it just makes them a better leader all the way around. So we are encouraging that and providing what we can as those things come up. All of our education, all of our organizational documents from policies to SOPs are going through review. We're adding some stuff, we're deleting some stuff, we're implementing new policies. Those are going through review. They will be drafted, and actually we're going to be putting those online so they're available for whoever needs to see them, or whoever wants to see them rather, as a matter of best practice more than anything else. In the not too distant future. There's only a few of us working on it, and there's a ton of them. So it's a slow process, but they'll be coming out here in the not too distant future, hopefully. And then retooling education, community education really goes back to like we talked about with examining community risk reduction and those types of things. Yeah, so I would say look for our SOPs online. Our human dignity statement is already online. I encourage people to go and look at that. That is a department-wide document that everybody has signed off on and agreed to, and I hold staff accountable to it. Frankly, the staff really holds themselves accountable to it, and I'm seeing better response to that type of stuff. So that those things are out there, and we're making progress in that area. So go ahead, Bill. That's it. I appreciate the folks that are online attending and listening to me ramble. And if you have questions, more than happy to answer what I can. Certainly take feedback. And I don't want to steal anything from the counselor. So if I'm thundering along more than I should, feel free to give me the high sign there. But yeah, I think I'm ready for feedback if that's met everybody's needs.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone from the Zoom audience who wants to say anything? It's not.
Great. Do you want to welcome? I know we have Sarah Marks, counselor online. Sarah, hello. It's good to see you. I see you on 3 different screens, Sarah. I like it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to actually be on Zoom. I've had COVID and I'm still not convinced I'm not contagious. So don't want to infect anybody. Thank you, Jeff. Very informative presentation.
I don't want to jump in front of somebody
Go jump. Go ahead.
who's got questions, but Thank you so much. Very informative. And thank you for all you do. Can you explain to us sort of in terms of the mission, the work, the scope of what you do and how we make determinations about what we need to invest in and what our priorities are? How much of that is set here in Orono based on the professionalism we have here versus how much of it's set by, licensing, state law, insurance requirements, legalities, things like that? How much of it, what's that balance?
So at the very core, all the state law requires you to have is a fire chief and a town forest fire warden. And then however you decide to have fire protection services after that is up to you. So you could theoretically say, hey, you know what, I don't want Orono Fire Department anymore. We're going to contract with town XYZ and that could be your fire department.
We're not planning that, right? Clear, yeah.
No, but I mean, if you want to know the mandates, I think it's important to go to the very core and say,
Sure.
this is where it all springs from.
Yeah.
So where we are for service level provided in the town of Orono has been decided upon by the town council. And as I understand it, only having been here for 5 or so years, not being a plank holder, if you will, this has been driven in the past by community desires, recommendations by the fire chief, and the communities want and the councils want to collaborate and support the University of Maine. So I'll get to this in just a second as far as what we do. There are core services where you have a fire department. There are core services that you have to provide as that fire department now that they're stood up. One of them is you have to put out fires, or at least make a good faith attempt to put out fires. That would be one of the core missions. The other core mission of fire department, given the population in the town of Orono, is the fire chief is responsible for fire inspections, and that process can be delegated down to somebody else. So I've delegated most of the authority to that to the life safety inspector. So he is the one that goes out and does the essential functions of inspecting and working with people and plans review and that type of stuff. Ultimately, by statute, unless there's something in the town that trumps this, ultimately by statute, I'm responsible for that.
It's not the life safety inspector works in your department. It's not.
Right.
Okay, Pat.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the reason for that is life safety code and the elements around life safety code are a completely different animal than what you find in the BOCA code and the other codes. And it's not, actually, it would be unfair to Pat to expect him to be as well versed as he needs to be in life safety and all the other codes.
Sure.
Because they do look at different things and there are at times crossovers and stuff like that. But what you've developed here, and I don't want to get into a soapbox and get too far off the track, but I think it's important to highlight that what's been developed here in the town is a community focused approach to how we're starting to deal with this. So we have Pat that's involved on the code side, the BOCA code side and some of the ordinance side. You have Dave that's involved on the fire side and some of the ordinance side. And then you have Ed Lesky, who is looking at it all from a 30,000 foot view and taking in some of the ordinance stuff with his law enforcement background and whatnot and his problem solving. And they have all come together and are building a team that wants to make it easier for people to deal with code issues and to where we can streamline the process. And when you come in for a plans review, you don't have to go to code and then come to fire and then go back and forth and whatnot. It's a sit down with everybody. We all talk, we all address issues. Everybody is in sync. Everybody gets the same reports. Everybody knows everybody else's concern. So in a way, I think you're going to, as this develops, you're going to see a much better product stemming out of legal responsibilities the town has for code enforcement on both sides of the house, coming together and saying, if we don't streamline this, then we're giving a less than superior product. That's what we're trying to do. So that's another area legally that we have to, and I kind of went off the track here, but that we have to comply with. How am I doing for time, Sophie?
You're doing great.
Okay. So that's the other thing. Now, back in the 90s, there was a third service in Orono that provided ambulance service. And they, because of staffing and because of training and legislative issues, they weren't able to provide that service anymore. And the town decided they wanted to keep an ambulance service. And the most logical place to do that is within the fire department. And frankly, if you're looking to maximize the ability or the work capability of the staff over there, having EMS rolled in there really makes the most sense because you're getting the most out of those people. So there are legal requirements. There's no legal requirement right now. Did that pass?
Not that I'm
There's
aware
no
of.
legal requirement right now for a community to have an ambulance service. However, there is legislation out there to say that a community has to adopt, has to have an agreement with some service to come in and provide them service. That doesn't, and I might be wrong on this because it's been a while since I looked at it, but as far as I know right now, that doesn't exist. That obviously isn't a good model. So Orono decided to move the ambulance service into the fire department. Orono decided they wanted a paramedic level ambulance service. And paramedic level is the highest level that you can get in the state of Maine right now to provide pre-hospital care. There is one level higher, but they ride on the helicopter. And I don't see us standing up on a helicopter unless you want to front that kind of money for us. But paramedic right now is the highest level that you can receive.
Highest ground level.
Ground level, yeah.
All right. Good stick
So-
with that. Yeah.
So that's what, again, that's what the community, I believe, expressed they wanted. That's what the council has wanted consistently. And that's the service level that we provide. When we provide that level, there are requirements put to us by Maine EMS that says, this is the training that you have to have. This is the equipment you have to have. These are the medications you have to have. And every year we're going to come out and make sure that you're compliant with all of these mandates. So those are the mandates that we have to have.
Can I interrupt for just a second,
Mhm.
Jeff? Just to say that along with the equipment and the medication, they also say, when you're gonna go to certain call, this is the staffing you need to have, which has been part of what we've struggled with. If you wanna elaborate.
Sure, yeah. So we have to have licensed people on the ambulance, at least one licensed provider. And really having the extra people available meets the need for Orono. So if there are people on the fire engine, like in the instance of, it doesn't make sense to have non-licensed people in the ambulance, I guess is where it comes down to. So they really want trained, educated, licensed people on the ambulance. And that's why we staff the way we staff. We have to have as many paramedics as we have to make sure that we're able to provide that level of care. Now, when you get into things like hazardous materials technician, like I talked about, and we talk about confined space rescue and rope rescue and ice rescue and all those other things, those are driven by a risk assessment within the community. So somewhere along the line, and I still support this today, somebody came before the council and said, hey, these are the risks we have in the community. These are the things that we need to meet. And this is what it takes to meet them. So all of the things that I talked about when I talked about special operations are risk-based programs that we provide. And they aren't just nice to provide and we may experience it someday. They are true risk-based operations that we have had to perform at some point within the last 5 years, we've had to do something. So it's not like they're skills that are just there and we waste our money. It may only be once, but they are special operations are so high risk, low frequency that they have to be maintained and the skill set has to be maintained.
Any risks that we should look into that we don't have covered now? I mean, is there a?
I don't think so right now, but I'll tell you that we are part of our strategic plan that we are slowly moving through is reassessing those risks to make sure we're not missing anything rather. So the problem with those specialty services is you have to be trained and you have to maintain them and you have to have equipment that meets a certain level to maintain them. And like I said, with the contract services, a lot of that specialty equipment has to be serviced by a third party provider. So If I have to go into a confined space, and that means a catch basin on the road, it might mean a pipe at the steam plant, it might mean somebody's septic tank, it might mean something at the wastewater treatment plant. We use ropes, we use pulleys, we use what would be like a winch on the front of a truck, except we put it on a hoist. All of that stuff needs to be tested by a third-party tester to prove that it's safe to use and it meets the standard. The other thing is a lot of this stuff expires. So like some of our harnesses have a shelf life on them, and we may only use them 3 or 4 times, but to make sure we're meeting the standard in the letter of the law, and we're not exposing the town to undue liability, which can be expensive when Maine BLS comes in. And that's the Bureau of Labor who manages comes in to make sure the employees are working safely. It gets expensive when you have to throw those away and start new, but the expense of those are less than it would be for a significant fine from Bureau of Labor, or heaven help us, we injure somebody on duty because of a piece of equipment that failed that wasn't inspected or whatever. Those are where those mandates come from. And our training mandates are driven by all of that put together. So we do annually have to have training that's required by Bureau of Labor, which is at a minimum, we have to do respiratory protection. We have to do lockout, tag out. We have to do, programs like that a lot of municipalities have to do. And then all that other training, in addition to the initial 40-hour training or whatever it may be. So for hazardous materials, for example, it's 40 hours here where they become hazardous materials technicians. And then we send them away for, is it another 40 hours in another 40 hours in Anniston, Alabama, so that they are able to deal with those weapons of mass destruction we talked about. So that's what's driving a lot of that. And those are the legislative mandates that are out there. Actually, when you go back to risk, I will share a risk with you that you should be aware of. And I will talk about this during when we talk about the budget, we talk about OMR, but I might as well talk about it now. Our volume is such on the EMS side of the house that we are frequently seeing the fire side understaffed. So there will be times when both ambulances will go out of the station and handle medical calls, and there will be one person back at the firehouse to handle whatever else comes in next. Or there'll be nobody at the firehouse because of the severity of one of those medical calls. So there's nobody, and we may not get people to come back. So when that happens, we will do what's called a recall. We'll send a message out and ask people to come back. A lot of times
People
we
that
don't.
are off work that aren't
That'll,
working.
yep, we'll ask them to come back. But a
Is
lot
there
of
a rule
times,
about how far away people can live or?
Nope. No, that's gone away.
Yep.
But a lot of times we won't get people to come back on the call back because they're committed. They're doing family things, or they're eating dinner or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
So that creates a risk in of itself to the community because those resources aren't readily available. So if both ambulances are out, and we've been lucky so far, we haven't had a major incident while everybody is out. But like with anything, it's a roll of the dice, and that has been the accepted level of risk that we've accepted as a community so far. But it is a risk, and I think people need to be aware of that. And it all comes down to staffing. Of course, staffing is expensive. People are the most expensive element of any organization, and to truly staff where we need to be would be probably cost prohibitive at this point.
Sure.
Can I ask a question as well? I was interested in the community risk reduction as a new developing
Mhm. program,
something that you're developing. And you talked about seniors and rugs. And one of my questions was, how would you know if you would seniors call you? And my other question along the same lines is, are that I have a couple of elderly friends who slipped on the ice this year, just getting their mail, and broke a wrist, and called EMS and had to go be transported by ambulance.
Yep.
So that program to me is interesting, how you're starting to evolve.
So as far as the seniors go, a lot of our decision making, believe it or not, is data driven, and we would pull that out of our EMS data. You know, did we go to somebody who fell? Well, they did. We should probably go offer them an assessment. The other way that we would do that is probably once or twice a year, we would offer that opportunity for folks to schedule an appointment for us to come out and do those types of assessments or whatnot in the house. I hope, and we've talked about a town nurse, I hope that something like this would be the foundation for community paramedicine in the community. There you go, there's community twice for you, three times. Anyway, I would hope that it would be a foundation for that community paramedic. To have a paramedic here in town that is able to do these assessments on a more regular basis, but also be able to go out and help seniors or whoever else needs it with managing their medication, helping with managing their diabetes,
Right.
giving some home instruction, doing spirometry. You know, if they're a long-term COPD or other lung patient, those types of things. Community paramedicine is really has evolved into a home health type function, but it's being run through EMS services. So a lot of the things that you might hire a nurse for that that person may or may not have a high demand for, we would certainly be able to use on the community paramedicine side, because in addition to the home health piece, there's also that risk reduction piece.
Right.
And there's that additional capacity to be another set of hands in the event that, you know, we have multiple EMS calls or whatever the case may be. Certainly we don't want them missing appointments because those are important. And the other thing is there's a community contact. I'm not saying we shouldn't have home health in the community. They absolutely have a place and they should be here. There's no doubt about it. But when you look at overwhelmed systems, community paramedicine has found its niche in managing some of those crises. I can tell you that community paramedicine is not something we would be able to do with our current staff. I can't send a paramedic today who's on the ambulance down to check blood sugars and talk about medication management, and then have to have them leave to go on a medical call. It's just that's poor service. I mean, and it creates a risk for both the resident and us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a focus. It would be a division or it would be a position, I'm sorry, that would fall under community risk reduction, but it really is an individual focus, much like a code enforcement officer.
Right. Thank you.
Are these like fee for service type opportunities to generate revenue in terms of providing a healthcare service in someone's community that may be eligible for reimbursement?
So I would have to look at that. I'm sorry, I don't have the info on fees right now. I know
sure.
there has been a push for that.
Yeah.
I believe Medicare is funding it at some level now.
Yeah.
But I would have to review that and look at that to be able to tell you.
It's an interesting potential synergy between, you know, the work you need to do to provide emergency service and the work you do to manage risk. And just, so how do seniors or their families find out about opportunities to do a home risk assessment?
So the program isn't fully stood up yet.
Okay.
Once we have it stood up, what we will do is we will advertise it.
Okay.
And we will blast it, you know, as far as we can. I know the counselors have a fair amount of community contact. If they see it, it would be really great if they could pick it up and blast it out for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have high hopes for it. We distributed some literature here a little while ago. And that really was a test run to see how we could do and what the demands were for it, or what the demand would be on us rather if we were to do that as far as calls and those types of things. And I'm hopeful to have something out within the next couple months to be able to get something spun up. At the very latest, and it does take a while to spin something like this up, but at the very latest, I would hope to have something ready for fall. So as you mentioned, you know, during the wintertime, we can talk about, you know, some of that stuff like balance when you're taking your winter boots off, you know, when you come in the house or those types of things. So
Right. I think ice was a big cause of, I had another friend who broke his hip.
Yep.
And he was 70, I think he's 73.
Yep.
So this winter. Great. Any other questions from or comments from our Zoomies? No?
I have
Okay.
one more for, okay, not, do we still have
Okay.
time? Yeah. How does it work with, a relationship with, we have a university that's got the kind of the size and budget of a city within our town. So how does that work in terms of, the relationship between public safety and the university in terms of our, I don't know if they're contractual, mutual understanding, well, how that stuff works. But I mean, obviously, there's a fire in Alumni Hall, we're going to take care of it, right?
Right. So right now, and I'll let, when I'm done, I'll kick some of that over to Sophie because she understands of more of the nuance
Sure.
to it than I do. As far as service provision goes, we are involved, like you said, with fire suppression. When university ambulance is not in service, and they are usually in service when the students are there. So through the summer and during school breaks, they are usually down. We are the primary ambulance service for the university. We provide them, I spoke about confined space rescue. We are their confined space rescue team. So anytime they go into a special space, like we talked about, they have to have a team on standby. And we provide that service. If we're tied up, we actually call them and say, hey, you gotta get out because we're not able to support you anymore. And they are receptive to that. We are very involved with their planning for events like main day, commencement, any concerts they have up there, any major events we are involved in, both from the code side and with just the general planning side for life safety concerns, fire response, ambulance response, all that stuff. We have a really good relationship with UMPD, and we're pretty much entwined in a lot of areas up there, and there's a fair amount of respect between both of us. So it goes both ways. We respect them and what they need to do and what they need to accomplish. We work with them to get through code problems and stuff like that. And then in return, if I have to go up there and say, no, you're closing a serving line down, or you're closing a dining facility down until we understand why your carbon monoxide levels are so high.
Yeah.
There's no pushback. There's that acceptance that we have the authority because we run the jurisdiction, and they're receptive to that. And honestly, in some cases, I think it's a relief for them that they don't have that responsibility on them. They can turf that back to me or whoever's making that decision.
Sure.
The other piece I'm going to turf to Sophie because she's going to know more about that.
So, I think it's important for people to understand that the University of Maine sits within the municipal boundary of the town of Orono. So for many things, the university is treated much like any other business or large property owner in the community. They do have their own law enforcement jurisdiction. So on the university proper, PD would manage all of that public safety. However, we do have informal agreements with regard to fraternities and some other properties off campus with them. From a code enforcement perspective, we are the authority having jurisdiction with the exception of electrical inspections. The state provides the electrical inspections for the University of Maine. Long before I came here, the town ceded the university's requirement to follow certain land use regulations or be permitted through the town, except for those construction projects within a certain number of feet from the municipal right of way. We do have a relationship that we've been able to build kind of beyond that, so that collaboratively we can look at the construction that they're doing to make sure that we can provide good service and that it's safe. We do all of the life safety inspections up on campus, code inspections, plumbing, They have their own MS, so there are certain things that they carry licenses much, and permits very similar to municipal permits. Anytime they have that, we would cede jurisdiction to them in the state. If they don't have that, then we kind of fall over them. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So and we must have like joint services around, like I see Deputy Chief Merrill at hockey games sometimes, not just watching. So, yeah. So we got.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for people to realize that we get a sizable payment in lieu of taxes from the university, $655,431 a year.
How much? 650?
655,431. And I think that was developed in large part due to a recognition of the collaboration and extra services we provide. We are one of if the only municipality in the state that gets a contribution like that from a university. And, in large part, I think it's because the size of the University of Maine certainly overwhelms the community.
That's good to hear.
We will have another discussion at budget time.
Excellent.
Again, with the full council,
Are there other
which
ways?
everyone can attend.
Yeah. Are there other ways in addition to meetings like this that you're able to get feedback on the types of things that you have? Do you have?
Yeah, certainly, we would love to have people email us. They can give me a call.
Not 911 though.
Not,
right?
not yet. Don't do 911. People get really upset when you do
Yeah.
that.
I had a fax machine when I was like 15, 20 years ago, and I had dialed 9 out, and I accidentally, like twice I did it, and I felt really bad. I was learned up on why not.
Yeah, so, snail mail, however they want to do it, we're more than willing to listen and give answers when we can. Sometimes the answer might be no, or it might be no for right now, but later we might be able to do it. So,
And we're always willing to explain why the
yeah,
answer
100%.
might be no. We try really hard not to do arbitrary.
That's important.
And the other thing I would say, you've heard it several times, Counselor Demerit, info@orono.org is a place you can send any question and the appropriate person will get it. There's a feedback form on the website that you can also click fire, and fire will get it directly.
Info@orono.org.
Any more questions?
I feel like I carried enough into the meeting today for everybody. So
Thank you. Thank you all, and we will see you later. Bye, Sarah.
see you, Sarah. Feel better.
Bye, John.